So welcome everyone to the 6th episode in the Arabic Accelerator series. Basically what we do here is we have a front-loaded method where we teach a section of grammar up front before anything. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose the Arabic language as the medium for his final message, and you have to agree with that. Within Arabic there are certain elements that are engineered into the language that make it unique and make it superior. And in a nutshell, what that is that what in other languages require separate words to communicate, Arabic does it through vowels. So the majority of meanings in Arabic, they don't come from words. They come from vowels and patterns and grammatical structures. So when you appreciate that and when you realize that and you're able to structure the study of the language based on these unique elements, and if you're able to teach these unique elements first, then this is what accelerates progress. And this is what allows you to begin an actual reading book within 21 days. And this is the book that we begin. It's called The Stories of the Prophets, Little Green Book. And we've been doing this, and we're now on our 6th episode. Inshallah, we will continue with the passage from here. But what I really need to get across here is that people study for years, okay, like 10 years, and they don't get any traction. And they're not able to translate simple sentences. They don't achieve sentence level fluency. Okay, so they'll have a large vocabulary, but they won't have sentence level fluency. And the reason is because they don't understand that the majority of meanings in Arabic, they don't come from words. They come from vowels and patterns and grammatical structures. Okay, so in one of my earlier videos, I talked about how there's a core and there's a central theme within Arabic that if you know that, it gives you half of all of your benefits. And this is dictated by your 80-20 principle. Because the 80-20 principle, what it says is that it says that there's a massive imbalance between causes and effects, and there's an imbalance between effort and results, and there's an imbalance between inputs and outputs. And this is pervasive, and this is everywhere. Wherever you look, you'll see it. Like if you look at your happiness, you'll notice that there's 20% of your friends that are maybe contributing 80% of your happiness. And if you go into your wardrobe, into your closet, and look at the clothes that you have there, there's probably 20% of clothes that you'll be wearing 80% of the time. Isn't that right? And if you go into any major city and survey the traffic, you'll notice that there's 20% of roads that account for 80% of all of the traffic. And the Arabic language is no different. Within the Arabic language, there are certain principles and there's certain rules that they account for 80% of what you will encounter. Okay, so what we do is we reapply the rule again, and we say within the 20%, there's another 20%, a further 20%, which is 4, because 20% of 20 is 4. And if you learn that 4% of the language, it will give you 80 of 80. In other words, it will give you 64% of the benefits. So let's round that off and say half. And surprisingly, this 4% of the language, it could be studied, it could be grasped and understood in an incredibly short amount of time. So within about 3 hours of focused study, a student can get this. So what we do is we have a front-loaded method where we teach this up front. So we're not teaching all of grammar, because that would be ridiculous. It would just overwhelm the student. We only teach those elements, and we present it as in a way that's fascinating, okay? Because you can't just start listing rules, random rules. Because the biggest cause of failure among struggling Arabic students is they start with the simple. They start with simple, and they learn about pronouns, and they learn about verb conjugation, and they learn about this is a masjid and that is a house, and vocabulary. Okay, vocabulary building is given priority, counting, phrases, conversational elements that students would need. So those things are taught first, and nobody teaches them how the language works, especially not up front. Nobody teaches how the language works up front. And this is the biggest cause of failure among struggling Arabic students, is they start with the simple and they try to get to the complex. What happens is they never get there. They never get to the complex because they're sitting there memorizing words and they think it's tedious and it's pointless, and they keep getting frustrated and they keep quitting. But then they have hope in Allah that there must be a faster, not faster, but easier way, so they try again. So like this one sister from the UK, she did the workshop, and the link is in the description. I highly recommend that everybody goes through the workshop and go through the 3 hours. If you go through the 3 hours, you will have half of all of the benefits you will ultimately achieve within the span of 3 hours. Okay, I mean the videos will be released to you gradually, like every 24 hours. So in the span of a few days, you will have all of this down. And then you go through this playlist, this Arabic Accelerator playlist, and then you see the structures occurring within the book. Because our goal is not to teach all of grammar. Our goal is only to teach that amount of grammar which will allow the book to begin. So the minute the book begins, 2 things happen. First of all, the enthusiasm level of the student goes through the roof, because they no longer have to wait for a payoff. They're getting immediate results. And the second thing that happens is that all of the theory comes to life, and they can see it through real examples. All right, and then it gives us an opportunity to teach more grammar gradually in a way that doesn't overwhelm the student. Okay, because they have a big picture understanding of how the language works. So every new phrase, every new structure that's taught in the book, instead of overwhelming them, what it does is it gives them aha. It gives them an epiphany, and they can see how it ties to the big picture, and it motivates them to continue forward. So what I'm saying is that when you study through this approach, you will be able to learn 16 times faster. Because if you do the math, 1600%, which is actually 17 times faster, because 100% faster would be 2x, 200% faster would be 3x, so 1600% faster would be 17x. So if you want to study Arabic 17 times faster, then this is the approach. So my contention is that speed, not only is it possible, but it's actually essential, because without it you get no momentum. And this is why students quit. And we had one sister from the UK, her name is Azmat, and I'll flash her email on the screen. And basically, I'm quoting from memory. What she said is, she sent an email to the help desk, and she said that I've been studying Arabic for 10 years. And then in parentheses, she says, yes, 10, and this is the 11th. And I kept quitting. I always thought that you had to sit with the vocabulary list, and for every singular, you need to know the plural. For every plural, you need to know the singular. And I, with long list of vocabulary, it was so overwhelming, it was tedious, and I kept quitting. But subhanAllah, I had hope in Allah, because I knew that there must be a faster, not faster but easier way, so I kept trying again. And then she says, subhanAllah, all the things I studied in 10 years, he covered in 1 hour. And it all made sense, and it was not tedious. You can't imagine the amount of money I've spent on studying Arabic. I wish I hadn't, because then I would be able to pay for this course. Okay, so that's the method that we're dealing with here. It's a front-loaded method. It means all of the considerable effort is at the beginning. But if you do it, if you remove the logical constraint, and first of all, you understand that in order to succeed, you need to lead with the complex. You can't start with simple and try to get to the complex. You have to lead with the complex, and you have to teach the most elaborate topics that make Arabic superior first. Now the question is, can it be done? So let's try. So this is what we've been doing for like over 20 years. I taught my first classes in the summer of 2001. And to this day, we have about 7,000 students that have gone through this method. So in order to get this core that I'm talking about, the 4% of the language that gives you over half of all of your benefits, look in the description, follow the link, and opt in for the workshop if you haven't already. And if you've gone through it, then I would suggest going through it again, because it's the kind of material that you would want to come back to a couple of times. And then watch the videos in this playlist where we bring the theory to life and we parse actual sentences in the Stories of the Prophets book. So today we'll do an entire chapter. We'll zoom in on one sentence. Okay, so this is chapter number 13. The chapter heading is Bi'ru Zamzam, the well of Zamzam. So the author, he starts, وَعَتِشَ إِسْمَاعِيلُ مَرَّةً. Once Ismail alayhi salam became thirsty. وَعَتِشَ إِسْمَاعِيلُ مَرَّةً. So here we have a fi'l, a fa'il, and an answer to the question when. So marratan is a nasab because of maf'ul fi. And this was talked about in the workshop. It's an ism, and it's answering the question when, and marratan, once. وَأَرَادَتْ أُمُّهُ أَن تَسْقِيَهُ مَاءً. And his mother wanted to give to him some water, okay, to drink. وَلَكِنْ أَيْنَ الْمَاءُ. However, where's the water? وَمَكَّةُ لَيْسَ فِيهَا بِئْرٌ. Whereas Makkah, in it there's no well. وَمَكَّةُ لَيْسَ فِيهَا نَهَرٌ. And Makkah, in it there's no river. And then he says, وَكَانَتْ هَاجَرُ تَطْلُبُ الْمَاءَ. And Hajar was searching for water. وَتَجْرِي. And was running مِنَ الصَّفَا إِلَى الْمَرْوَةِ وَمِنَ الْمَرْوَةِ إِلَى الصَّفَا. From Safa to Marwa, and from Marwa to Safa. So over here, the author, he brings a Kana sentence where we have the ism of Kana, which is Hajar, just one word on its own. And then تَطْلُبُ الْمَاءَ وَتَجْرِي مِنَ الصَّفَا إِلَى الْمَرْوَةِ وَمِنَ الْمَرْوَةِ إِلَى الصَّفَا. All of that together is the predicate of Kana. And as you can see, it's a full sentence because it has verbs. تَطْلُبُ is a verb, and تَجْرِي is a verb. تَطْلُبُ means to search, and it has an object, searching for water. And تَجْرِي means to run, running and searching. The principle here to understand is that when kana is brought before a mudari verb, so tatlubu and tajri are imperfect verbs, present future tense verbs. So when a kana is brought before a present future tense verb, then it gives you past continuous. So earlier in the book, it talked about Azar, Ibrahim alayhi salam's father, his name was Azar, and he used to sell idols. In other words, he would sell idols. وَكَانَ أَزَرُ يَبِيعُ الْأَصْنَامِ. So over there we translated it, and Azar would sell idols. Would. In other words, it was a continuous habit that happened over number of years, because that was his occupation, that's what he used to do. He used to sell idols. Azar would sell idols. But over here, I'm not saying an Hajar would search for water and would run from Safa to Marwa and from Marwa to Safa. Instead, I'm saying وَكَانَ الْهَاجَرُ تَطْلُبُ الْمَاءَ, and Hajar was searching for water and was running from Safa to Marwa and from Marwa to Safa. So that's another possible translation, because past continuous in English can be communicated through the word would, and also could be communicated through a was and an ing. So the question is, which one do you use and how do you detect this? So the answer is, if it's talking about a widespread habit, like an occupation or something that happens over a long period of time, then we say used to do that. In other words, would do that. Used to and would are the same. And if it's a single event, that's a continuous, prolonged event that spans over several hours, then Ibrahim alayhi salatu was building the Kaaba with his hands. And Ismail alayhi salam was building the Kaaba with his hands. So over there we don't say would, okay? Because the building of the Kaaba happened once, and it was a prolonged single event. So prolonged single event, we say was ing. And Hajar was searching for water and running from Safa to Marwa and from Marwa to Safa. Continuing, وَنَصَرَ اللَّهُ Hajar, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helped Hajar, and he helped Ismail, وَنَصَرَ إِسْمَاعِيلَ فَخَلَقَ لَهُمَا مَاءً, so he created for them water. وَخَرَجَ الْمَاءُ مِنَ الْأَرْضِ, and the water exited from the earth. وَشَرِبَ إِسْمَاعِيلُ, and Ismail drank. وَشَرِبَتْ هَاجَرُ, and Hajar drank. وَبَقِيَ الْمَاءُ, and the water remained. And the water remained. So these are all simple sentences, fail, file, not a whole lot to analyze, not anything to parse. And then the author says, فَكَانَ بِئْرَ زَمْزَمَ وَبَقِيَ الْمَاءُ فَكَانَ بِئْرَ زَمْزَمَ, and the water remained, so it became the well of Zamzam. This water turned into the well of Zamzam. فَكَانَ بِئْرَ زَمْزَمَ. So over here, if you ignore the fa, كَانَ بِئْرَ زَمْزَمَ, how many words do we have? What's the total number of words? Think about it. If you said 4, then that would be correct, because there's kana. Within kana, there's a pronoun, and then bi'ra would be the third word, and zamzam would be the fourth word. Okay, so these 4 words, how many major portions do they divide into? 3, because the kana is the main verb of the sentence. It dictates what kind of sentence we're dealing with. We're dealing with the kana sentence, and every kana sentence divides into 3 parts. So there's the kana, which we call a fi'l naqis, an auxiliary verb. And then within the kana, there's the huwa pronoun, which would be the ism of kana. And then the 2 words, bi'ra zamzam, is the predicate of kana. So my question to you is that bi'ra zamzam, what kind of phrase is that? Is that a noun adjective phrase where the 2 are matching? Or is it a mudaf ilayh phrase where the first word is in nasab and the second word is in jar? So think about that. If you said it's mudaf and mudaf ilayh, that would be correct. Because notice the translation. So it became the well of Zamzam. Okay, so in the mudaf ilayh phrase, the requirements are 3. The first word, which we call mudaf, has to be empty of al, and there shouldn't be tanween. So look at the word bi'ra, there's no al and there's no tanween, so it qualifies. And the next word, zamzam, is supposed to be in jar. Okay, and jar is normally reflected with kasra. So zamzam, does it have kasra? It doesn't have kasra. So how do we explain that? Okay, so this is something we would not teach in the introductory theory. 4% of the language that gives you half of all your benefits. We would allow this to appear in the book. Okay, so we have like muslimuna, muslimina, muslimatun, muslimatin, zamzamu, zamzama. So these are isms, and normally for an ism, when it experiences grammatical states, it has 3 unique case endings. So rafa is normally reflected with dhamma, nasab is normally reflected with fatha, and jar is reflected with kasra, and this happens in the majority of cases. And if there's the al, then you would expect there to not be a tanween. So al-baytu, al-bayta, al-bayti. And if there's no al, then we see baytun, baytan, baytin, unless it's mudaf, in which case it will be baytu, zaydin, bayta, zaydin, bayti, zaydin. House of Zayd, house of Zayd, house of Zayd. So that's the normal way isms are used, singular isms, and plural isms as well. This is normally how they're used. So every now and then, there's isms that either do not change at all, and regardless of what state they're in, they're always used the same, like pronouns, like alladhi, for example, or hadha, for example. So when hadha or hadihi, when hadihi is subject of a verb, is hadihi. When hadihi is an object of a verb, you say رأيت هذه, I saw this particular feminine thing. And if it's following a preposition, then it's still هذه. So those words don't change at all. And then there's words that change, but they don't change fully, they change partially. Later, we would introduce the students to the topic. We'd allow something like this to occur a few times before we do a deep dive in it and talk about it like thoroughly. So at this stage right now, this is a little like I gave her her book. It's a little like what? I gave her her book. Because in English pronouns, for the majority of them, there's three versions. So there's a he, him, and his. He, when the pronoun is intended to be subject of a verb, you say he came, he arrived. I saw him. And when the pronoun is intended to be part of a possessive structure, you say his pen. Okay, but for the feminine pronoun, it's like I gave her her book. So the word her is used twice, but one of the her is representing object and the other her is part of a possessive structure. So similarly, in the Arabic language, there's a subset of isms that do not change fully. They only change two ways. So the rafa has a dhamma, and the nasab and jar are both reflected with fatha. So now the question is, which isms belong to this change restricted category? So the term we use for it is change restricted. So a word is either changes fully or it's change restricted. If it's change restricted, then it will be a foreign name. So foreign names are generally change restricted, feminine names are generally change restricted, and some plurals like ulama'u and fuqara'u and aghniya'u. It doesn't have three changes. It just changes either with the dhamma or with the fatha. No kasra, no tanween. No kasra, no tanween. So that's what's happening in bi'r zamzam. So that was a side topic. فَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ فِي زَمْزَمَ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed Zamzam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed blessings within Zamzam. And then he brings the sentence that we want to parse and we want to analyze. So this is the main sentence of the video. هَذِهِ means this. Al-bi'ru means well. Yashabu means to drink. And then we have al-nas, and then we have al-hajj. All of those words are pretty straightforward. So go ahead, pause the video, and try to translate this sentence. وَهَذِهِ هِيَ الْبِئْرُ الَّتِي يَشْرَبُ مِنْهَا النَّاسُ. And then you can take it forward, وَيَأْتُونَ بِمَاءِ زَمْزَمَ إِلَى بَلَدِهِمْ. Or you can stop it on fil hajji. I think for the purpose of our illustration, we can stop it on al-hajji. So the sentence from هَذِهِ until al-hajji. Let's count the number of words and let's part this. Remember, we have a four-step process in parsing sentences. And the goal behind parsing is twofold. First of all, we want to reinforce all of the grammar that we've learned up until now. So when the topic was first introduced, we don't need to master it, like 100%. So what's really good about this, what's really unique about this approach is that it allows the student to progress with a 60-70% understanding of any given topic, especially in the opening days of class. So when a topic is first introduced, the only reason why I would choose to talk about a topic is because it has broad application. Because it belongs to the 4% of the language that gives you half of all of your benefits, or it belongs to the 20% that gives you 80% of your benefits. So if it has the broad application, that's the only reason why I would talk about it. If it didn't have that broad application, then we would ignore it and we would suppress it and we would ruthlessly avoid it until the student is ready for it. And that's really what this approach is all about. So what that means is that the first time a given topic is introduced and spoken about, it would be done at a 30,000 foot bird's eye view, broad level, okay, with some details, only disclosing the amount of details that are required to resolve and unpack the sentence we have in front of us. Okay, all the other details would be left for later, because the only reason I talk about it is because it has broad application, and by definition what that means is you'll see it again and again. By definition, that's what that means. You'll see it again and again. Every subsequent encounter of that structure, when we draw your attention to it and we remind you about what we learned about it and we give you further details about it, it can only improve your previous understanding of it. So if you were at 60, it can't go to 30 or 40. It can only go up. So what this allows is it removes the need for tedious memorization, and it removes the need for unnecessary drills and homework and all of those other things that cause people to quit. We just get rid of all of that, and we just naturally read the book. We see the structure, we talk about it, and the student gets it, and maybe they get it 100% the first time I talk about it. Maybe their understanding is a little fuzzy, but that's fine. As long as there's a 50-60% understanding of a given topic, we can move forward. Good enough is good enough. Good enough is good enough. So there's no need for perfection. and then once we move forward, we see it again, and then we see it again. Because today I'm going to talk about two things. I'm going to talk about the Ismul Ishārah and the Mushārun Ilayh, which is a topic that was spoken about in the second of the Arabic Accelerator videos in the playlist. And then we're also going to speak about the relative pronoun, the Mawṣūl, which was talked about a number of times already. Okay, so your previous understanding of those two topics will get even more clear. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's apply the process. So the goal behind the parsing is to reinforce the grammar that we've learned already, and also give us an opportunity to teach more grammar based on need and necessity. So step number one is to count the number of words. So starting from هذه until the word al-Hajj, go ahead and count, and let's see what we get. Okay. So if you said 10, you would be correct. And it's pretty straightforward. And I don't see any place where a student can make a mistake because they're all individually, they have spaces in between. So هذه would be word number 1, here would be 2, al-bi'ru would be 3, allati would be word number 4, and then yashrabu would be 5. So yashrabu is the 5th word. Now, is yashrabu carrying a pronoun? So should it be counted 5 and 6, or should it be only counted 5? So that depends on whether there's a noun following it. That's the subject. So if there is a noun following it, then the verb is counted as 1. And since an-nasu is sitting there, so we will count yashrabu as just 1. So yashrabu is the 5th word. Minha would be 6 and 7. An-nasu would be 8. And then fil hajji would be 9 and 10. So the total number of words are 10. How many major portions do these 10 words divide into? Okay, so based on هذه being an ism, you would probably say 2. Mubtada and khabar. Mubtada and khabar. The sentence divides into 2 parts, mubtada and khabar. Okay, but then هذه would be the mubtada, and here and everything else would be the khabar? Maybe. Okay. One second. Actually, in this sentence, the total major portions are actually 3. It's not 2. It's 3 because of the here in between. Now, normally the principle is that you go from right to left, and you see whether there's phrase level relationships, and wherever all of the phrase level relationships exhaust, that's where the predicate begin. So assume there was no here. If the here was missing, then it would be وَهَذِهِ الْبِئْرُ الَّتِي يَشْرَبُ مِنْهَا النَّاسُ فِي الْحَجِّ, and then all of that together would not be a full sentence. So the author, he wanted to force the division between the هذه and the al-bi'ru التي, because the principle with the demonstrative pronouns like هذا and هذه is that they could be used on their own, and they could be used alongside a noun where both of them together are functioning as a single unit. Like in the masjid example, this masjid, which Ishaq alayhi salatu wasalam built in Sham, is Baytul Maqdis. So over here, the author wanted the hadihi to be the mubtada, and he wanted the al-bi'ru allati to be the khabar. But since the two would connect together and form a phrase, because what determines whether hadihi is being used on its own or whether it's being used as part of a phrase is the al on the next word. So when the next word has al, then the two would gather together and function as a single unit. So the author, what he's doing is he's dropping an is, so to speak. Arabic doesn't have an is, but he's forcing it with the here. So this here pronoun, its whole point and purpose is to separate between the two halves of the sentence, because with the removal of the here, there's a high likelihood that a reader would mistake it and connect it together. Now, if it's just 2 words, like ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ in Surah Al-Baqarah, it says ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ, then for ذَلِكَ to be the mubtada and al-kitabu to be the khabar is acceptable, and there's no need for a separating pronoun. So the separating pronoun is a convenience. It's something that a speaker would choose to insert in between to make it easier for the audience to determine the grammar. And sometimes it's more appropriate to just leave it out and say ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ, and then say لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. Okay, and I'll talk a little more about the Surah Al-Baqarah example in a minute. Let's finish this. So this pronoun that comes in between to separate between the two halves of the mubtada and khabar, it's only deployed when the khabar begins with al, when the predicate begins with the al, because that's where it could conceivably become a phrase with the earlier word, and to avoid it becoming a phrase, the pronoun would come in between. So what the pronoun does is it's like a wall, and it exhausts the phrase level relationships. It makes it impossible for هذه and al-bi'ru to connect as a phrase. Here's a wall in between. Okay, so with that in mind, it has a name. It's called Ḍamīr al-Faṣl. Faṣl, the separating pronoun. So the sentence divides into three parts: mubtada, a Ḍamīr al-Faṣl, and a khabar. The mubtada is هذه, one word on its own. The Ḍamīr al-Faṣl is the here, and the rest of it from al-bi'ru until al-hajj would be the khabar. Now the khabar, how many major portions does it divide into? So it's a phrase. So the correct answer is Mawṣūf and Sifa. Al-bi'ru is the Mawṣūf, and التي يشرب منها الناس في الحج would be the Sifa. So we have here an example of a noun that's definite being described using what would have otherwise been a full sentence. And that's why the التي was deployed in between. Because in one of the earlier videos, we saw an example of where it was talking about idols that are rock. And the idols remain quiet because they were rock that does not speak. So over there, the reason for why the idols remain quiet was given through the prepositional phrase لأنها حجارة لا تنطق. So between حجارة and لا تنطق, there was a Mawṣūl Sifa relationship going on there, that the rock was being described by the fact that it does not speak. Rock does not speak. Rock which does not speak. So whenever a noun is described using a full sentence and all of it is kept as a phrase, then in English, who, what, which would be used in order to create a connection between the noun and the sentence that's describing the noun, and it's done 100% of the time. In Arabic, it's only done half of the time. So when the noun that's being described by the full sentence is indefinite, then the who, what, which is automatic. As we saw in that example, hijaratun la tantiq. It doesn't say hijaratun allati la tantiq, it's just la tantiq. But if the noun at the front is definite, then alladhi or allati is brought in between, and that's what we're seeing here in the case of the well being described by the fact that people drink from it. So the translation, okay, so I'll give you the translation at the end. So al-bi'ru is Mawṣūf, and allati yashrabu minha an-nasu fil hajj would be the Sifa, and the Sifa would further divide into Mawṣūl and Sīlah. So with respect to the Mawṣūl, it's brought within sentences in order to change the default value of the sentence from indefinite to definite, so then it can match with the noun at the front that's definite, because Mawṣūf and Sifa need to have the same definite, indefinite value. Okay, so if it's indefinite, then there's no need for the Mawṣūl because the default value of the sentence is indefinite. The grammar people, they've been able to recognize that sentences have a default value of indefinite. So if it's lined up with a noun that's indefinite, then there's already a match, and the who, what, which would be automatic. Now, if the noun at the front is definite, then the sentence needs to be converted, and it needs to be the value of it needs to be changed to definite, and that's what the allati does, who, what, which. Now, in the Arabic language, the relative pronoun is called Mawṣūl, and the sentence that follows it, the relative clause, it's called Sīlah. The principle that's unique to Arabic is that within every Sīlah, there must be a third person pronoun referring back to the Mawṣūl. It and the Mawṣūl will be treated as if they're one and the same, and they'll be translated together. And in English, this pronoun doesn't exist. Like in English, they don't say this is the well which people drink from it. People don't speak like that. So this is the well from which people drink during the days of Hajj. So over here, if you look in the sentence, yashrabu minha an-nasu fil hajj. So there's a ha pronoun there. So the allati and the ha pronoun are matching. So within the Sīlah, there's a requirement that it must contain a third person pronoun referring back to the Mawṣūl. It and the Mawṣūl will be treated as if they're one and the same. And this pronoun is called the a'id, referring pronoun. So if that pronoun is at the end of the sentence, then you'd grab it from there and you bring it to the front, and if anything's attached to it, then that ends up getting translated first. So this is where we're getting the from which. Okay, so here's the translation of the whole thing. This is the very well, in other words, not any well. This is the very well from which people drink during the days of Hajj. From which people drink during the days of Hajj. So the Sīlah divides into a fi'l, a fa'il, and two muta'alliqs. Minha would be the muta'alliq connecting to the verb prepositional phrase, and fil hajj would be the second muta'alliq connecting to the verb, and each muta'alliq would divide into jar majrur, and that would conclude the sentence. And then he ends the sentence, وَيَأْتُونَ بِمَاءِ زَمْزَمْ, and they bring the water of Zamzam back to their cities. هَلْ شَرِبْتَ مَاءَ زَمْزَمْ, have you drank the water of Zamzam? And that concludes the passage. So there you go, that's our 6th episode in the Arabic Accelerator series. If you enjoyed that, then please like and share and subscribe and leave a comment below and let us know what you thought about it. And if you have any questions on any of the elements, the grammar elements that I introduced within this video, then please ask below and inshallah I'll respond to that. And if you have any questions about the approach in general, then you can comment about that as well, and we can have a conversation, we can discuss it. And if you're new to the channel, then I would suggest to look in the description and follow the link so that you could do the 3 hours the workshop. Because based on the 80-20 principle, we know that within the Arabic language there is a core and there's a central theme. And if you know that core, if you know that central theme, then it is what enables the beginning of a reading book, okay, in such a short period of time, within 21 days. And then again, it allows the student to progress and learn the rest of the language without being overwhelmed, without having to sit and memorize things. So this is how tedious memorization is completely eliminated from the process, and you're so much more likely to succeed when you follow the front-loaded approach. Again, the biggest cause for failure among struggling Arabic students is they start with the simple and they try to gradually go to the complex. And most textbook series, popular textbook series, this is how they're structured. They start with simple sentences and they start with simple structures, and they don't give you a big picture understanding of how the language works in the beginning. They don't do that. Nobody does that. Okay, so this is why people, they lose motivation and they're given long list of words to memorize, and they think, what's the point? They're taught rules, but the rules are taught without any reason, without any rhythm, without any rhyme, and with no relative importance. And this is what causes the overwhelm. Okay, so with the big picture understanding of how the language works, every new detail that's taught, it doesn't do that. It doesn't overwhelm the student, but instead it reinforces what was taught earlier. The theory comes to life, and then it fascinates the students. It gives them aha moments. It gives them epiphanies. And this is what we've been doing for 20 plus years at this stage right now. I taught my first classes in the summer of 2001. And there's 7,000 students that have gone through this approach and this method, and it truly works. So check it out for yourself for free. The link is below. Follow that link and opt in for the workshop. And I'll see you in the next video. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.